They spoke of humans in whispers, in classrooms meant to amuse younglings and caution soldiers. Creatures of flame and fury, they were called, an extinct species that once dared challenge the very stars. Velana, High Archivist of the Sorrentary Dominion, had dismissed those stories all her life. She'd read the ancient records, what few remained, fragmented, contradictory, and absurd. Humans charging starships with metal blades, refusing to surrender even when their species faced extinction, surviving in caves, deserts, even space wreckage. It was dramatic nonsense, legends twisted over time by fear and admiration. The Sorrentary prided themselves on logic, precision, and historical accuracy. Emotion clouded reason. Honor was for poets, but the humans, according to the stories, worshipped both like gods. Velana considered them a cultural anomaly, a brief chaos event in the galactic timeline. Nothing more. Their destruction, centuries ago, was unfortunate but inevitable. A species so volatile couldn't survive in a system that demanded order. She remembered a particular academic forum. A younger scholar had presented a theory that humans had not been defeated but had chosen to vanish, leaving behind only myths. The hall had erupted in laughter. Velana hadn't laughed, she rarely did, but she had nodded along. Disappearance was often a synonym for defeat, and defeated civilizations didn't become legends. They became dust. Yet despite herself, she had studied them more than most. Perhaps it was curiosity or a need to understand how such a flawed species could command such reverence in alien cultures. Many primitive systems still shared ancient tales of the last human, or the man who spoke to fire. Soldiers from the Outer Rim carried charms engraved with the word Terra, believing it brought strength in battle. Ridiculous. Mythologizing a dead race was nothing new. It happened to the Darvek, the Tyleri, and now apparently the humans. She sifted through corrupted audio clips and damaged visual logs. A human soldier screaming defiance as he charged alone into a wave of war machines. A message encoded in primitive language, repeating one line, "We are not finished." These were romanticized, unverifiable accounts, probably fabricated. No species resisted extinction with pride. No species willingly stared into oblivion and smiled. And yet, the stories persisted. So when the Dominion Council offered her the assignment to catalog the remains of ancient Earth, she accepted without hesitation. It was a simple job: document ruins, extract whatever historical data remained, and verify that the planet truly held nothing of value. The archives needed closing. The legends needed burying. She believed she was the right one to do it. Before leaving, a colleague from the xenoanthropology wing had joked, "Careful. They say if you hear a human voice on Earth, it's already too late." She didn't respond. Superstition was beneath her. Still, that night, she replayed a corrupted recording of a human voice over and over. It said only 2 words, "Remember us." She told herself it was curiosity, but something deeper twisted in her, an unease she couldn't quite name. Velana's transport cut through the atmosphere of Earth like a whisper through dust. The planet had long since been declared uninhabitable. Atmospheric scars from orbital bombardments still lingered, and high radiation pockets stained the upper sky. As her craft descended, ancient cities emerged beneath layers of vegetation and ash, half swallowed by time. Concrete and steel lay broken, shattered under the weight of centuries, yet traces of symmetry remained. Roads, buildings, human design enduring nature's reclaiming grip. A contradiction like everything else about them. Her scanners flickered as they approached the Himalayan range, an anomaly in a world otherwise dormant. Faint energy signals pulsed from beneath the surface. No formal records mentioned an installation there, yet the readings were precise. Against standard protocol, she landed the craft on a precarious ridge and began her descent on foot. It was illogical, but something about the signals demanded a personal investigation. She moved with caution, the wind howling around her. The deeper she went, the stranger it became. Walls of metal and alloy greeted her, embedded within the rock as if the mountain had grown around them. A sealed vault sat at the base, untouched by time. It responded to her presence, not with violence, but recognition. The door slid open. Inside, the air was crisp, recycled. Lights flickered to life. Generators hummed. The architecture was unmistakably human. Functional, direct. No ornamentation. Everything served a purpose. Her steps echoed through empty halls as she moved deeper into the unknown. Her equipment began logging strange fluctuations in the ambient field, subtle distortions, as if the place was bending time around itself. In the command center, dozens of screens came alive. Faces appeared, human faces captured in their final moments. A woman recording a farewell message to her children. A man saluting the camera with a half-smile and blood on his face. Each one ended the same way. A fade to black, followed by the words, "We stayed." Valana's breath caught for a moment, something she hadn't felt in decades. These weren't military logs. They were memories, sacrifices, statements. None of it made sense logically. Why keep recording as everything collapsed around them? Her AI assistant stuttered suddenly. Warning, presence detected. Biological signature, unknown. Intermittent. Clarify, she demanded. Source unclear. Pattern resembles human. She froze. It couldn't be. Every biological trace should have decayed long ago. Perhaps a fault in the sensors. Perhaps something left behind was mimicking life. Still, her hand moved to the pulse reader on her wrist, measuring her own vitals. Elevated, she moved on, deeper into the facility. At one point, the hallway lights flickered, and in that brief darkness, she saw it. A silhouette. Not projected, not imagined. A figure, broad-shouldered, standing tall, unmoving. When the lights returned, the hall was empty. Her AI didn't register anything, but she had seen it. She told herself it was stress. Nothing more. But somewhere in the quiet hum of the corridor, a voice echoed faintly, almost imperceptibly. You came late, but you came. She didn't know if she imagined it. But for the first time, Valana felt like a trespasser. Not into ruins, but into a memory that refused to die. The core chamber was buried beneath layers of reinforced alloy, centuries beyond anything the Sorrentary had cataloged from Earth. It opened not with force, but with invitation, as though waiting. Valana stepped into a circular room lined with dormant consoles, humming faintly with residual power. At the center stood a single containment unit. Unlike the rest of the facility, it was pristine, untouched, active. As she approached, the unit flickered to life. A voice, clear, calm, unmistakably human, spoke without introduction. You took your time. Valana stopped mid-step. Her AI assistant remained silent. No system warnings. No translation barriers. The voice had spoken in her own tongue. The chamber lit up, and from the core, a projection emerged. A human figure, male in shape, clad in an ancient form of military armor. Not aggressive, not welcoming, simply present. He looked at her the way a teacher might look at a student, patient, measured. You came to confirm our extinction, he said. Now you know the truth. We're not gone. We endured. Valana remained composed. Are you a remnant AI? I'm the sum of memory, duty, and defiance. I'm what they left behind. He wasn't a simple program. His responses adapted, his tone shifted with nuance. Every sentence was weighted, like someone used to delivering eulogies and orders in the same breath. She asked for his designation. I was called Commander Idris. But names don't matter. What matters is that someone remembers. He gestured, and holograms bloomed around the chamber. Not simulations, records, real moments. A soldier dragging his bleeding leg across rubble to rescue 2 children. A group of civilians refusing evacuation to hold the final line. Engineers working in silence to keep the power grid alive for just a few more hours. No speeches, no fanfare, just determination. All of it documented by human hands. Why preserve this? She asked. Idris didn't blink. Because history forgets what doesn't scream. She felt something shift in her, an internal resistance beginning to erode. These weren't myths. They weren't exaggerations. They were choices. Humans chose to die standing when survival demanded kneeling. They documented their end not to be pitted, but to be understood. They said we were too chaotic, he continued. Too emotional. They were right. But it's why we lasted as long as we did. Velana found herself speaking without calculation. You lost. No, he said. We were defeated, but we didn't lose. The distinction settled like a weight on her chest. The Sorrentary taught that survival was victory. But here stood proof that to humans, victory meant something different. To resist, even when hopeless. To act, even when doomed. That was victory. She didn't know why her voice trembled. Why show me this now? Because someone had to see. Someone had to carry it forward. He stepped back into the projection chamber. Legends aren't meant to impress, he said. They're meant to warn. And in that moment, Velana understood. She hadn't uncovered a ruin. She had awakened a truth that had waited centuries to be remembered. Velana stood alone in the chamber long after the projection vanished. The air felt heavier, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Her AI remained silent. No alerts, no interpretations. There was nothing left to analyze. Only the echo of words and the weight of meaning. She exited slowly, retracing her steps through corridors that now felt more like shrines than halls. Every flickering light, every cracked panel bore witness to something greater than survival. Humanity hadn't just endured, they had refused to be forgotten. Back at her transport, she activated the uplink to the Sorrentary High Archive. The automated query prompted her for classification: ruin, artifact, or anomaly. She hesitated. None of the designations fit. What she had seen, what she now knew, was not an artifact of the past. It was a message still alive. She closed the transmission. No report will be filed. Instead, she opened a private data log and began recording. Not with sterile observation, but with truth. She detailed the holograms, the voices, the clarity in Commander Idris's words. Not to prove the existence of humans. That was never the point. It was to document their essence. What made them feared? What made them unforgettable? They had become more than a species. They had become an idea. And ideas, she now understood, could never be buried. Velana reviewed the recording again. One line stayed with her. We were defeated, but we didn't lose. It challenged everything she had been taught. The Sorrentary measured progress through logic, order, and control. But humans had measured their worth through resistance, sacrifice, and memory. A culture of paradoxes, flawed yet fearless. She looked out over the ruined landscape of Earth. It was still and silent, but no longer felt empty. Not a graveyard, but a promise. The kind that waits, patient and undying, for someone to finally understand. She felt something shift inside her. No longer a scholar cataloging the dead, but a witness bearing responsibility. Not to retell the myth, but to honor the truth it concealed. Later, as her ship lifted off, she caught one last glimpse of the mountains. There, just beyond the ridge, stood a figure. Still unblinking. Watching. No readings. No trace. And yet she knew Commander Idris, or whatever he had become, had never left. Back in orbit, Velana encrypted the entire data set. Not to hide it, but to protect it. Some truths, she now believed, should not be dissected by cold logic. They should be remembered, passed on with reverence. Humanity's story was not a warning. It was a challenge. Her final entry into the log was short, unembellished. They dismissed the legends. I did too, until I met one. And with that, she set course not for home, but for the distant frontier, where myths still lingered in the shadows, waiting for someone brave enough to look. Because now she understood, legends don't die. They wait.